welcome back, folks. This is the K Files. It is Thursday morning or Friday night or anytime on YouTube, depending on how you're joining us. This is Tarrick Pittman. He's an advocate for Ward 1, probably the busiest man in town.
You got that right, brother.
Born and raised in Rocky Mount, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know that you've been around a little bit.
Yeah.
Best computer man I ever known. You fixed my computer when nobody else could.
That's what they say. That's what some say.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You run a popular podcast.
Sure.
That I've been a guest on to promote this show.
Yes.
And that's when we began to talk about some cases that you have familiarity with.
Yes.
And we want to get into those.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing this.
Absolutely.
This is good.
Thank you so much. Well, I've done your show a couple times. I don't know who's interviewing who. The thing about it is, like, when I was doing a little bit more homework for Orlando Flowers, because I hadn't looked at that case in probably a year or so. So I was doing some refresher work. And I go to his Facebook page. Sadly, a lot of times when someone dies, their Facebook page stays, for eternity. Your name popped up first on his friends list.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, wow, I brought you here to the show to talk about other folks that we'll get into later. But I was like, man, Tarrick pretty much knows everybody. And I mean, you said you told me last night that you grew up with Orlando, right?
We called him Lindell Flowers. We grew up together. He's really close with my older sister. So they were really good friends, childhood friends, and I got an opportunity to see him a lot. And he would stop in the shop, He's one of those guys that would, even though we kind of grew up and kind of separated and lived two different kind of lifestyles, we still would connect. He was somebody that would come in the shop and give me words of inspiration to kind of keep me going, and he was a good guy.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anybody that said anything bad about him. When I first wrote a story for the Telegram about him, I think maybe the year he died. The 2018. I wrote about him, and I spoke to his sister, one of his sisters, and some family members, and just people in the neighborhood, and I couldn't find anybody that had anything bad to say about him.
No, it's surprising. He's what we called a OG in the community. Somebody that has done their hard knocks, did their time, and then came back and will give advice to the younger people. And so when you lose those type of people within the community, it not only affects family members, it also affects the area as a whole that they grew up in, because a lot of young people look to those individuals for guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is it was a huge loss for the community. It was a travesty. And I'm glad that you are picking up this case. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he like I said in the first segment, he was a guy that got in a little trouble when he was younger, in his 20s, in his teens and his 20s. Yeah. But as a 45-year-old man, you're right. I mean, he was a leader. Yeah. Beloved by his family, certainly, and the community at large, and to die because somebody couldn't let their old girlfriend go. It's just tragic,
That's what it is. I don't know the details.
We'll watch the show next week. We're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into.
You gonna pull the details out. You got me on WHIG, man.
Well, it was sad for what Orlando, like you said, he had done his knocks and early on, and and everything, and to now to be a member of the community that helped people and meant a lot to people and everything, and then to die the way, I mean, to die over a girl, I mean, it's just ridiculous, and like I said, I'll get into all of that next week. But one of the reasons, when I was on your podcast, Independent Thinkers, by the way, folks, you need to find it on YouTube and watch it. Especially because I'm on a couple of them. You really surprised me when you said that your uncle had been murdered, and it had been an unsolved. So far, it had been an unsolved murder. Of course, there's some other folks. I'm sorry. There's some other folks, but I mean, I wanted to talk. This is all that I have on your Cat with Fighting Crime, who maintains a huge database of murders and missing people and all that stuff. It is all we got, right? Yeah. He was beaten to death, and his house was set on fire. And that was in July of '96 on Myrtle Avenue.
That's correct.
That's all. That's it. So tell the folks more. I don't even have a picture. That's the wrong picture, by the way. That's we'll get to him in a minute.
Johnson, right?
Yeah.
Tony Grant, like I said, he's my dad's brother, half brother. They share the same father, and he was a good man. He was an educator in the community. He did a lot for young people. We were not extremely close. But I would see him at family gatherings. I got a Christmas gift from him every year.
Wow.
And so for somebody to have that type of heart to reach out, to his nephews that, he probably see, a few times a year and think of them, during the holiday season. He was just a kind individual, kind guy. And it really, my dad still lives with that to this day. We actually talked about it yesterday, and I told him I was going to appear on the show. I was going to bring it up. I wanted to make sure it was okay with him, and he was excited in one breath, but in another breath, it brought back that horrible moment and those emotions from that particular time period. And I could look at him. He's not a very emotional man, but I could see that it bothered him, that there's something that he lives with. And it's something that a lot of parents and relatives, when they lose a loved one, you have to deal with. And Rocky Mount is a pretty small community. So imagine, losing your child or losing someone close to you to horrible violence, and you have to continue to live in the community and look at everybody, with a side eye, because you don't know if they know information or if they participated in it. If you're a mother, your parenting skills could be, at the forefront. You worry about that. How you raise your child, and people look at you differently, and so I think there's a lot of hurt that people have within the community when they lose someone to violence. And we lost a lot of young men, over the years to tragic events, and their murders have been unsolved, and parents are left and families are left with a gaping hole in their heart.
And it gets worse and worse each year.
It gets worse and worse each year.
Folks think it gets better, but
it's worse and worse. I think about my grandmother. My grandmother passed away not knowing who killed, her child. So I think it's difficult, and she talked about it a lot, and she worried, if the police was ever gonna bring closure to her. And when it didn't happen, my dad mentioned that yesterday. He was glad that I was taking this up, just to bring closure to the remaining members of the family.
Well, that's what Chief Robinson in one of our meetings, he talked about, that he's, the saddest part of all of this stuff is when mothers and fathers die, and they don't know what they don't know what happened to their child, or they don't know who killed their child. And I mean, that's rough, and it's a situation that I get thrust into a lot. Like you said, just that talking to your father yesterday, I do that a lot, where I talk to someone, and on one hand they're happy that someone's paying attention to what happened to their loved one, but on the other hand, it's also a rush of